Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here, everyone. The session for today is called Engaging Learners in In-Person Classes. This is a continuation of the previous session we did. The previous one was more of engaging learners in an online environment, and this time we would be having some conversations around how can we engage learners in in-person classrooms, what are the strategies, what are the ways to do it, and some brainstorming around that. Engaging learners in in-person classes. What are we hoping to achieve? So by the end of the 90 minutes, we hopefully should have had a conversation around these themes. The importance of engagement, using active learning in my classroom. What are some active learning strategies and some reflections and planning what comes next? So we'll start with this question. Looking back on your time as a student, what type of learning activity or experience do you remember most vividly? What made that experience stand out to you? So, when you were a student, if you think of any learning activity or experience that you still remember to date, what made that experience stand out for you? It's a lot going back in your memories, long time back. Very happy to hear some responses. If you want to share, please do raise your hand and unmute. Otherwise, you can also write in the chat.
I was just going to say the things that stick out in my mind were arguing with my social studies teacher. And I think it stands out in my mind because it was a heck of a lot more interesting than anything else we ever did.
Mhm.
And I was a good conservative person at the time. So obviously, my teacher who had worked for the Liberal Party in Alberta for 20 years was wrong about everything. But she humored me, and I ended up actually voting Liberal a couple times in my life after that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jeff. The argument, the conversations, the challenge that you had with your social studies teacher. Lovely. Anyone else?
Yeah, sure. I can remember my management accounting teacher. Uh, he made it come alive. He used an example across the street where there's some construction building going on, and the way that he brought, it into the real world, something that mattered, like not just numbers on in a textbook and that. And that's why, like, it made me love management accounting and made it stick in my head the concepts as well. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Making the topic more relevant
Yes,
to you as a
absolutely.
student.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
beautiful. Thank you, Lisa. If you have any other thoughts, any other comments.
I'd say that some of the work I did when I took the adult learner program at U of C,
Mhm.
working with groups and just really um, learning from the others, getting different perspectives in what we were actually discussing. I certainly my eyes were opened to what the other learners were experiencing. So I think that actually was a positive thing. Because prior to that, I would say I was the type of learner who would like to sit midway in the classroom, really wanted to be quiet, did not want to engage in group work. So it was a
Mhm.
really difficult thing for me to engage in group work initially until I, really had that experience and realized how beneficial it could be.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So we have something around peer discussions, peer group things, something around making learnings relevant, and something around engaging with someone on a cognitive level. For me, one of the experiences that I often look back to when I learned the best was not through books, was not through listening, but when the teacher would engage me to do something actively when all of my body was involved, something that I remember. So it's interesting to see how different experiences and different people learn, and the things they remember about what even after so many years. We still have some memory of that. This is again some data on the importance of engagement, especially in higher education. Any guesses on the attention span of an adult these days?
I'm going to guess 20 minutes.
20 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. 8 minutes, yeah. So when I was researching about this today, sorry, Dana, you can please, yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. My guess was 8 minutes because that was the last stat that I remembered. That 8 minutes would be okay. But according to many journal websites, many researchers are now saying that of adults and also of Gen Zs, the average attention span is of 8 seconds. And I was like, wow, 8 seconds. What can I do in my classroom that I can have their attention for more than 8 seconds, and that would be an achievement. But again, I think as teenagers, people have more, or youth, young adults, people, I think they were saying they have more attention than as we go older, and it goes down to 8 seconds right now. But it's and if you're teaching young adults, it would somewhere be around 5 minutes, 8 minutes. But as we grow older, it will go down to 8 seconds. So especially after COVID, especially with all of this AI stuff, all of this social media, everything has become instant coffee. A Google search engine response take more than these many seconds, we get anxious, or people tend to get anxious. Why don't so there's no We often don't find that idea of patience, of being on the journey, of learning. Like, we need instant solutions. That's the sad part of where the world is going towards. But that is why engagement becomes even more important in higher education. And how can we ensure that? How can we make learning more meaningful, more relevant, as Lisa said? How is something that is written in the textbook not just written there, but how can it speak to me as an individual? It enhances skills and increases retention. We'll see some researches around that in a while. And these are the three levels of engagement that some researchers speak about: cognitive level engagement, emotional engagement, and behavioral engagement. So, cognitive engagement would be something which I think Jeff mentioned in his experience of what he remembers. You were engaging with the person on a cognitive level, finding some challenges, making sure that your brain was not bored, or brain was not too much stressed out. It was at the right level of where it needed the strike to be. There's also emotional engagement. How much emotionally charged are you about the subject? What is the curiosity level? How much do you really want to know about this topic? Are you emotionally invested in it? Some people have called this state as the state of flow as well. There are often times, and this is oftentimes when we are playing, Dana, perhaps ringgit, or we are playing any other sport, or playing a musical instrument, we lose the sense of time, but we are so much engrossed in that activity. And many scientists mention that state as the state of flow, when our brain stops processing time, as it because we are so much absorbed in an activity that we do not know what time is it, or if we have eaten food or not, because we are so much engrossed in that. So again, that level of emotional engagement is called flow. The last is behavioral engagement. This is something that, as instructors, as faculty members, we can often see in our course. If students are paying enough attention to their courses, if they are spending enough time on their assignments, how well they are doing, how well they are improving based on feedback. So that is how much of their behavior is actually invested in the subject, or how much are they not interested in and just doing it as a checkbox activity. So three types of different engagement which are important, and how can we bring all of these three in our classrooms as much as possible? Perhaps not always, but as much as possible for us. Something on passive learning versus active learning. So passive learning would be basically students listening to a traditional lecture, watching a video, reading. So this right now, if there was no engagement right now, it would be passive learning, because you're just listening. If you're engaging in it, then perhaps it can take a form of active learning. Engagement can also doesn't mean always to engage with your hands, with your tongue. It can also engage with your mind. So if the information is relevant to you, if your brains are uh, uh, actually invested in that, then it is also a form of engagement. Active learning would be students perform activities during classroom that inspire them to ask questions, reflect, discuss, and apply the course material. So before I move to the definitions, and show you the research around active learning, I wanted to ask, what do you think is active learning?
I think active learning is when the learner's brain is remolding and changing and processing the information rather than just supposedly sticking it into a storage locker somewhere up top. It's manipulating the information based on other information and going further.
Beautiful. I love how you've basically it's how brains are actually involved in manufacturing of that information of or manipulating it or working toward analyzing it. Thank you. Anyone else?
Ali, isn't it just about participation?
Yeah. So yeah,
Students participation and learning as
yep.
opposed to just sitting there listening?
Yep, that is an important component of active learning. How much is the student participating in that learning endeavor? Whether that participation is hands-on, hearts-on, or minds-on, that is dependent. But how much is the student also participating in it? So some of the ways we can describe active learning: thoughtfully engage with the course material, instructors, and peers. Very often we see that the interaction is often between so on level, no level would be instructor is just saying anything, not asking anything from the student. On a better level would be when instructor is asking questions and students are responding to it. Another a level higher up would be students are speaking with themselves, with the peers. I think one of the things that Michelle and I think you mentioned was the peer engagement, the peer learning, that spoke out to. So in active learning, it is extremely important that students are speaking with themselves as they are constructing meaning, as they are processing that information. So how much opportunity is there to actually do that? Places a greater degree of responsibility for learning on students rather than only the instructor. It is strange, but if suddenly a teacher starts implementing active learning strategies in the classroom, and we often find that in literature as well, and there are studies, and there is feedback from the students. Do you like that teacher now, or how effective is that teacher? Students would generally say no. We would like to just listen at the start. We just listen to them because that's easy for them. If you're doing active learning, it means that they also have to put in the effort. They also have to work. They cannot just show up in the morning just for a class and expect to doze off during the class and listens to half of the what the instructor was saying and leave halfway out. So how can active learning requires an entire departmental shift at one and at entire institutional shift as well, because then students would also compare that this teacher is better than the other teachers because they just give me information, otherwise the other teacher actually makes me do stuff in the classroom. So it's important to realize that in active learning there's a greater degree of responsibility on students, and that is important. It enhances engagement and leads to deeper learning. And why are we saying that? I will show you some research stats as to where this is coming from. But anything that involves students in doing things and thinking about the things that they are doing is active learning. So it's not just doing things, it's also thinking about what they are doing. The reflection stage is very important in active learning. This is a short video. Is the voice audible?
When I think of active learning, I think of students co-constructing knowledge with me in some way. That could be a project, it could be around a discussion, it could be a fishbowl.
When I see a classroom where students are talking more to each other than listening to the professor, that to me is active learning.
Active learning involves creating and constructing artifacts, such as a drawing or a painting or a sculpture. If you're in the performing arts, active learning is a performance.
I get to be creative here, and I get to develop new things and new activities, and even things with real life like paper and scissors, and having students construct and build and perform.
Active learning is as much figuring out what the questions are as it is figuring out what the answers to those questions are. In fact, the questions are far more important than the answers.
Choosing meaningful activities or questions is at the heart of what makes active learning effective. We need to ask them questions that offer opportunities for meaningful thinking.
Active learning is the only thing I do these days. I don't lecture if I can help it.
When I think back to my college experience, the only courses I remember are the very few that I had that incorporated active learning. Looking back 10 or 15 years later, I'm thinking, I wish I'd had more of that.
Different professors at University of Minnesota were asked what is active learning. Any response that stayed with you or that you resonated with as they were sharing?
Ali, I would say that
Yeah.
the thing that stood out to me was, I think one of the ladies who was talking about how 10 or 15 years later, that's really all that she remembers of her education. So
Yeah.
it's really stuck out.
Thank you. Thank you. This is often the thing that if there's something that people remember about school days or college days, or about not with the friends, with the teacher, what did the teacher do? Would one of the things would be how that teacher made them feel. I think that is something that go, and how did they learn, right? And it is those experiences that generally people remember. Um, if there's anything else that people that resonated with people.
I, I like the questioning comments. It all comes down to questions. So it goes to they're processing the information.
Yep.
And that's why the questions are so vital.
Yep. Thank you. And this is very important that the answer, as much as it is important, but the question is far greater important, and it is setting up for success in their lives as well, because in lives we will not find answers to always all the things when we want them, but how can we set them up so that they find joy in searching for those answers. So what evidence is there that supports active learning? I've cited a bunch of researches here. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but generally there is a consensus that active learning enhances student learning. It builds on previous knowledge. It is promoted by constant feedback, perceives greater knowledge and understandings. It retains knowledge so that people remember more, find their courses personally rewarding, and it's more meaningful and it's more personal, it's more relatable for them, better able to tolerate obstacles in the learning process, build social skills because they're interacting with their peers, very important, and nature of active engagement activities, what causes students to have a deeper learning. Some of the findings from one particular research that Freeman did, and this was published in his 2014 paper, and there's a graph of failure rates and percent of, if I'm talking about graph A right now, percent of students in the class and the failure rates. And there were two groups that he did this experiment with. The one of them was only through lecture method, no active learning involvement, and the second one was with active learning. And you can see the difference. It's a 12-point difference between of failure rates between people who were exposed to active learning versus people who were not. Freeman goes so much so in this paper, he says that if this was a drug trial, the 12-point difference is so great that you will have to stop the trial and give that dosage that you are giving to the other control group to make sure to proceed with the trial. So the difference is a lot of 12% in this case. And graph B suggests that test scores versus percent of students and concept test results. And you see the diagram for lecture versus active learning. So there's overwhelming evidence that active learning is something that works for the long run for students. This is the Dale's cone of experience. This is again something you may have come across, you may not have come across, but on the left side, you'll see that people generally remember what? You'll see this triangle, this pyramid. If they're just reading, they generally retain 10% of that information. If they're hearing, it's generally 20%. And as you move down, if they view images, if they watch videos, if they attend some exhibits, go on a tour, watch a demonstration, participates in a hands-on workshop, design collaborative lessons, and it goes down, the retention rate goes from 10% to 90%. So as the type of activities change, their retention information levels also change. On the right side, you'll also see that they've put some learning outcomes for different types of things. So if it's just a defined list, very basic learning outcomes, they will generally read or hear or listen to those. If there's more of application based, analysis based, creation based, evaluation based, they will apply more of their thinking and would retain more information. It's interesting. So active learning applies constructivist view of learning as opposed to passive learning, which was a transmissions view of learning, which means that the student is the empty vessel and the lecturer comes or the faculty comes and they deposit information into that person. Whereas on the constructivist view, the facilitator would say, I know a lot about the topic, but I will create situations and present challenges for you so that you can construct your own meaning, putting them in the driver's seat so that they can construct their knowledge and understanding. Students encounter safe yet challenging situations in which they can try, fail, receive feedback, and try again without facing a summative evaluation. So without the fear of failing in an exam, they are free to openly experiment and learn from their mistakes and get feedback and improve. So an iterative process. Can anyone share any examples of any active learning strategies that you may have used, or you may have seen others use, or you may have read about those? Any examples of what strategy would qualify as an active learning strategy? Risa, role play definitely is an active learning strategy. Case studies, yeah. Case studies is definitely an active learning strategy method. Games, yeah. Um, very important active learning strategy method, very difficult one to make as well, because making games, there will be a workshop. We're trying to plan a workshop later in the last week of April on game based learning, on how can you incorporate and make games. So difficult to make, but high rewards as well. Using one's hobby as a way to pass across message. Interesting. Solomon, can you say a bit more on this?
Hey, I don't know what have been said before I joined in, but I hope I'll catch up.
Yep.
Anyway, so when I say use one's hobby, something that you do regularly, it's easy for you to understand the dynamics of those things. And if you want to teach something new to someone and the person is struggling to understand, you can contextualize that new knowledge, for better want of word, that you can contextualize that new knowledge to that person's hobby. Let's say, for instance, someone who likes soccer. The person plays soccer so much, and they're trying to, make the person maybe, I don't know, right now, nothing is coming into my head, but I mean, like, you could just, put that into soccer and see that person will be able to see clearly what you're trying to say than just speaking from the science point of view or just speaking vaguely to the person. It has worked for me though in the past, and still now, yeah. That's why I suggested that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Solomon, for sharing that. Jeff said debates, a very important method, a very important strategy that many instructors use in the classroom. This is a diagram from simple to complex level active learning strategies. These mention some of the many out there, and we will be exploring some in today's session. But from simple that require less preparation by the instructor, because we are also pressed for time. And as instructors, we have so much more to do. There's all constant marking. There are other things in our life. There's other responsibilities at the institution. So depending on the time we have, depending on the topic that we are studying, depending on the objective or the outcome we have set, these are a few examples. So pause for even a simple pause in your session, instead of 90 minutes or 3 hours or 4 hours long straight session, is just giving a 5-minute pause can also be considered an active learning, because you're giving them pause to reflect, and that's an intentional pause. You're giving them a task to do in that pause. 1 minute writing paper, self-assessment, large group discussions, small group discussions, think, pair, share, a very common popular one, informal groups, triad groups, mixing the groups. When do you make pairs? When do you make triads? Group evaluations, peer reviews, case studies, and it goes on to the more complex ones, into role playing, jigsaw discussions, experiential learning, hands-on learning, forum theater, inquiry learning, and some simulations. So these are some examples of active learning strategies. The question is that many instructors ask, how do you make time for active learning in the classroom? I have to cover these many pages from my textbook in one session. How do I make time for active learning in my classroom? Any thoughts on that?
One thing I'm working on now is having the facilitators create 10-minute lectures to do as part of the pre-class homework, so that they're still presenting the material the way they want it, but it gets it out of the way so that the class time can be used for something less routine than sitting down, shutting up, and taking notes while the facilitator talks.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Jeff. This would come under, I think, flipped classroom, in which the lecture time whether it's reading, whether it's this 10 minutes of presentation, record it and send it before to the students, so that it's their responsibility. They have to come prepared to the classroom, so that the class time can actually be used for discussing those or analyzing those or making it come alive in some way. But that's a beautiful strategy, Jeff. Thank you for sharing that. Solomon said creating room for group discussions in our session. How can there be intentional room that we make in our slide decks only, or somewhere that there is space for that? Any other thoughts? How can we make time for active learning? Insert a Mentimeter, definitely, Michelin. Inserting a tool for a quick poll, or as they're walking in, a quick test to check their prior knowledge can help in getting their voice heard before the instructor moves forward. This is one suggestion out of many suggestions out there as to how do you make time for active learning. So if I think of my 3 hour long lecture or 90-minute long lecture or 60 minutes long lecture, if I can divide that into small chunks, so advanced organizing would be before the class starts. So this is something that Jeff mentioned. If there's a session, if there's a small lecture, if there's 10 minutes or something, that comes under advanced organizing before the class starts. And then you divide your class into three segments, three lecture segments. So 10-minute to 12-minute lecture segment, 10-minute, 12-minute, three times of that. And then within those, how can we insert an activity that can help students either assess what they've learned or do a group work to process or construct knowledge or to analyze information, whatever the task is, whatever they have done. But how can this be meaningfully be added throughout the session? So it doesn't become a habit of, oh, I will speak for 2.5 hours, and then if I get time, I will do this activity at the end. That will not keep their interest alive. To keep their interest alive, it has to go through each part of the session. It has to be an integral part of the session, and that is how it will become more meaningful for them. And in the end, close it down with a summary. Again, this is one suggestion. There can be many other suggestions on how do you actually make time for activities while you're doing active learning, because there is always a feeling that if I do an activity, it may take more time than I have anticipated that to. So how can I, when I'm planning my lessons, I'm very intentional as to how much time I'm giving for group discussions. How am I taking their feedback? Am I taking everyone's feedback or one person's feedback from the group, so that there's voice heard, but it doesn't always take the time for my sessions as well. So if you observe, when we started the session, I asked everyone if they can share their name, departments in the chat. Why was this? Because we had observed it from our initial workshops that when we unmute and when people are sharing about their names and departments, it takes 10-15 minutes are gone, right? How can we reduce that time so that the information is still there, people are still heard, but we move on with the session, right? So how can this be an iterative process that we continuously learn from? How can I use active learning in my classroom? These are some tips that perhaps can be helpful before we go into the breakout rooms. Learning outcomes. What do I want my students to achieve at the end of the session is very important. If I have figured that part out, it will be easier for me to think of an active learning strategy. So once I know what I want my students to know at the end of the classroom, then I can think of my active learning strategy. What are the logistics? What is the time constraints that we have? What is the class site? What is the class mode? Is it physical, virtual? Depending on that, your active learning strategy will change. Choosing your active learning strategy. Is your active learning strategy introducing new information, assessing prior knowledge, analyzing concepts, extending or deepening understanding, facilitating peer feedback? What type of activity do you want to have? There are many activities out there. Depending on what do you want to do, you will choose your activity. Your activity should not guide your classroom, but your class, your content, your outcomes should be guiding your activity. Based on this, I need to find this activity to do, assess prior knowledge. And okay, I have three options. This will work better because this requires less preparation from my end, and perhaps my students are not at that level yet. So depending on the readiness of the instructor and the students, you can choose the active learning strategy. And the comfort level. There are many facilitators who are scared to try something new because they have not tried it before. It is difficult to come out of our comfort zone as well. it is also said that we often teach the way we have been taught. So if I have never been exposed to an active learning strategy, I will be hesitant to try it out. So how can I start small? Maybe it's just assessing prior knowledge Mentimeter thing at the start, and then slowly move on to the more complex activities or strategies. How can different facilitators in the same department come together to design an active learning strategy? And then they can carry out in different ways so that it eases out the burden, the preparation time as well for the teacher. So these are some of the ways one can use active learning strategies in their classroom. Let me show you how these websites look like. Okay, so this is K. Patricia Cross Academy. It has a list of active learning strategies. And for example, if you go to Jigsaw, teaching strat technique Jigsaw, if you click on Jigsaw, a very cool thing about this website is that it will show you a video of what that activity is. You can download an instructor's guide of what will the students be doing, what will it's a very cool thing. There are 3 or 4 files of any handout, anything that you would be doing, and how do you adapt it for online teaching, and it gives a video on that as well. So this is one website that I will be sharing with you. The other website is this is from Queen's University, and they've divided active learning strategies into 3 different groups: small group, individual, and large group. So if we do small group, it can show you different active learning strategies, and if you click on any, it will show you what that active learning strategy is, how much time it needs, what pointers, if can it be adaptable for online learning, and it will give you some suggestions. If you want to do large group, let's say go snowball. What is snowball? This is how snowball happens. An example, some pointers, a very quick overview of what each activity does. And this is University of Waterloo, some examples for active learning strategies of how a few strategies here. So I'm going to share these 3 websites with you in the chat. You can look at any one website. Don't overwhelm yourself because this is a very short session and you'll be in your breakout rooms for the next, let's say, 12-13 minutes only. So whatever website you choose, stick with that website and read any 1 or 2 strategies that you think will be helpful for you, and then discuss with your groups. So Lisa said that she would like to listen, and Samuel said that he'd like to listen. Okay, so I will put you in the breakout room, and whichever breakout room you're in, that would be fine. Hi everyone, thank you for coming back to the main room. So so there were 2 groups, so I'll go group by group. If you guys can share what if there were any discussions, any strategies that you would like to use, and how would you like to use them in your classroom, or perhaps which component of which session can they help in enhancing the learning. So I'll go to group 1 first, which is Lisa, Solomon, Samuel, and Jeff. If any of you want to share any of the strategies.
No, we didn't really get a chance to discuss any. We were just looking at them.
That's fine. So that's completely fine, Jeff. I know that there weren't much discussion. So whatever, any strategy that you think you liked or anyone in that group liked, if you can share that would be.
They had a lot of sort of opinion-based stuff where it was democracy, where everybody got 5 votes, and
yeah,
there were 5 opinions in different places in the room, and they could use 3 or 5 or 2 of their dots to see which opinion was the most. One thing I did like was the cumulative brainstorming, which is basically either a small group or even individuals would write down a contribution towards a brainstorm and then pass it on, and somebody else would add to it. But because they had the previous people's information, they could respond to it. So again, they're processing the information and taking it further than it would be just throwing out ideas in the traditional brainstorming.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jeff. Anyone else from the same group wants to share any opinion? Solomon, Samuel, Lisa, any strategy that you liked from reviewing those?
I think I like the K Patricia strategy, the jigsaw one,
Yeah.
especially where you have to break down complex topics, share it amongst the participants. That's quite fun for me.
Yeah.
Even though I'm also looking from another side where um, people are reluctant to spearhead, that
Yeah.
learning. That could be like a challenge, but besides that, I mean, like I find it interesting because um, sometimes the people that we teach, they, it just seems like there is this barrier. I mean, like this kid that you are up there, and then maybe we are not reasoning in the same frequency with them. But when I mean, like peers are able to, transmit that knowledge in the same frequency that that generation lives in. I mean, it
Yeah.
makes much sense. So I mean, like if each person understands their piece and then they come together and each person independently comes together and then share that knowledge within the pairs, that knowledge would be transferred easily and yeah, in the way
Beautiful.
they understand better.
Thank you so much, Solomon. Thank you for sharing that and the reasoning behind it. I particularly enjoy using Jigsaw because it helps in breaking, if it's a complex reading, if it's a 5 page long reading, and perhaps it's difficult for people whose first language is not English to read those complex topics. So how can we divide them? Okay, you read these 3 paragraphs, this group reads these 3 paragraphs, and you become experts in that. And then you break it off, you break the and you mix the groups again so that there's an expert of each page in that group and they are able to explain what their group meant. And as a facilitator, you are able to verify if they are saying what they're saying is correct or not, and how can you prove that. That's a very good strategy to use. Thank you, this group. Moving to group number 2, which was Lisa, Dana, and Michelin. Any strategies that you thought worked well or you would like to experiment with?
You don't want to do a 3-hour lecture and then just do an activity if you have time left. And just before I got kicked out, I was going to say that's the same part that resonated with me as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Dina. And yes, some of them require more time. But if you have less time, if you have, let's say, I just have 10 minutes or 7 minutes for an activity, how can I do something which is meaningful, which is not just activity for the sake of activity? That is also a problem, but is also meeting my outcomes, meeting my objectives, and students are engaging in that.
I was one of the ones I quite liked. It was similar actually to 3-2-1. It was the now I have to look at it again. It was the sticky notes, sticky note clustering, and I see that as being kind of similar. I can see how they could be brought together where people have sticky notes and they talk about their talk about what they learned and what is still they're still unsure about, and arranging it on the whiteboard. And I could see in a group of 36 or 40, my goodness, we would have an entire wall covered. So how do we bring that down? How do we make that a shorter activity, a meaningful, still shorter? Again, word cloud or Mentimeter might be a way of doing that and capturing that in a really quick fashion.
Yep. And perhaps Padlet, because Padlet already has sticky notes. You just type it down, everyone types it down, already comes. So you do not waste time in students coming up to the board, sticking it, and then going back to their seats, takes away time. So how can we integrate technology in helping us do that? Lovely.
Wonderful, wonderful.
There's just so much there. I'll have to take a look at it later and that. But I like the digital storage. I don't know how we could how to be used, but I like the digital story and the fact that if English isn't the first language, it's a different way of students to show their learning, show their understanding, their knowledge, and that. So that's intriguing and that. So, but great resources. I can't wait to go through it all. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. But the last component that I wanted to focus on before we break off would be to how can we use AI in helping us design an activity. So now we know the importance of it, the engagement importance, that the evidence, what the research says about active learning, exploring some of the strategies, some of the websites out there. Now, if I were to use AI and having a conversation with AI to see if AI can suggest any activities to help me structure my responses. So I will share my screen. Uh, and the tool that I'm using right now is ChatGPT. It's a free account. I haven't paid for it. And what I would really like to do is to ask you to give me a topic, to give me a scenario first. So for now, I'm just using the scenarios that Dana proposed. I'm a facilitator at Columbia College. I'm teaching a class of 40 students. Okay. What is the topic that we are teaching? Any topic, and let's see what ChatGPT comes up with.
You want a dental topic?
Yeah, it can be a dental. Let's do dental.
Endodontics.
Endodontics.
Yes. ENDODONTICS.
Endo. Is this correct? No, I don't think so. No. And
There's a D in there. ENDODON. So you're missing a DO. There we go. DON.
oh,
The back.
endo. Okay.
Endodontics.
Okay. Okay,
There
makes
you go.
sense. Okay. And what's the, so this is the topic. What is the outcome? So what do you want after the session? By the end of the session, I want students to
Understand the steps in the procedure.
okay. What is the general age group of students?
20 to 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you suggest? Okay, so it gave me these 10 different activities, right? And imagine if I wanted to, if I liked someone, let's assume I like, so not necessarily, and you can keep on asking, suggest more, and it will give you. What activity amongst these 10 would you think is can happen? I did not give a time, sorry. I only have, let's say, 10 minutes to do this activity. So if I time bound it as well. So it will give me now activities that can be done in 10 minutes.
I like that error spotting. That's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. So if I like that, can you tell me in detail? Oh, no. Can you make a detailed plan of error spotting? It will give it duration, objective. How would the 10 minutes be broken? So what's 1 minute for introduction, 2 minutes for case presentation, group discussion, and class-wide debrief. Um,
That's pretty cool.
yeah. So how can we leverage AI out there to help us in making these activities? So it's less work for facilitators, but also how can we keep on asking AI? Okay, now use this activity or use this strategy to suggest something. What you can also do is upload a presentation. So if you have a slide deck, upload a slide deck here from Upload My Computer, and you can ask him, analyze this slide deck and tell me in which portions can I insert an active learning strategy, and it can give you possible. You may not always agree with it, but it's good to brainstorm with it. I'm not saying you take everything exactly and copy paste, but it's a very good buddy to talk to brainstorm with. So this is one way that we can use or leverage AI to support this, to support what we are doing. Yeah. With that, I will do a. This is another sheet that I will attach in our email. This is a quick cheat sheet. If you had to tell your departments or other facilitators how to do how to do active learning in your classroom, this is a very quick two-pager step cheat sheet on how to do active learning, and there are 10 steps to get started. The first is creating an open and safe environment, making sure that the facilitator and the students themselves both feel safe and ready to engage in that. What is the goal of an activity? Choosing the right exercise. If it's a jigsaw, we do jigsaw. If it's a snowball, we do snowball. If it's a post-it parade, a sticky note parade, we do that. You choose the right exercise. Number four, identify preparation for this exercise. If it's a game-based learning, you may need to prepare weeks in advance to be ready for that class. If it's a very small activity that can be done very quickly, you can do that perhaps with little to no preparation. Consider links to other class elements. How is this activity linked to what I'm doing in my classroom, and where does it flow well? Um, Plan how you will introduce the activity, what will you tell students. um, Plan the logistics of it. Does it involve a technology? Do students have access to technology, to internet? Consider how you will judge success. uh, is it only for assessing prior knowledge? Is it for learning purposes? Is it for just for constructing knowledge? So consider how you may not always need to judge, but there may be scenarios in which you would judge. And these are some words from the wise. Don't do too much. Don't try multiple techniques at once. Start with one. Evaluate midterm. Students sometimes don't see the big picture with the activity. Help them. People also say that the debrief of an activity is equally important than the activity itself. So how can we put equal focus on the debrief that we are doing after the activity? Use questions that are challenging but not too hard at the right level, so the brain is not bored and not stressed as well. It's at the right level. Timing is hard. Exercises often take longer than you expect, and groups may dislike not having time to share. So how can you provide them opportunities for students to share in different ways? Be sure to save time for questions. Don't tell students what you can't cover because of imperfect planning. The effective reaction may not equal to value of the activity. Don't conflate. Sometimes this is a very interesting comment. Sometimes students would be very energetic after, oh, I had so much fun in this activity. That is good. What did you learn from this activity? Not and these two can go hand in hand, and at times it can be a very fun activity, but you are not learning from. So is it wasting time actually? So how can fun and learning happen simultaneously? Students sometimes feel it's okay, learn from experience. So a very quick two-pager cheat sheet for anyone who wants to delve into active learning and start doing it in some way or the other. Any thoughts, any learnings, anything that you liked in the session? We are close to the end, and I'll share the feedback form so that everyone can fill. But any thoughts, any suggestions, anything that you're excited about to try, or something that you're still confused about and hoping that it solves with time? Jeff said, I think that,
I think
sorry.
there were lots of great tips and activities in there, Ali. I'm really excited to collaborate about it at
Yeah,
work.
beautiful. Thank you, Dana.
Yeah, I think one thing that really struck me was actually Dana's comment from earlier, where there's not enough time. How do I get time, and that kind of thing. And that I had thought of the idea I just put in chat earlier, but I'd completely forgotten it months and months ago. Um, and it sort of jigsaw takes a long time the first time, but by the third and fourth time, it's one I used years ago when I was teaching.
Mm-hmm.
By the third and fourth time, you don't need to explain what's happening to everyone. You just need to jump right into the topic. And that saves you 10 minutes over time number one for the activity.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Jeff. And this is a beautiful idea. If there's an activity which you think can work on different topics, first time it may take more time, and when you do it subsequently, it will take far less time. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Anything? Another thing, that please do reach out to Center of Excellence. Please do reach out to me if you want to have a session only for a department. If your department is having a meeting and you want us to come in that meeting and to brainstorm some ways, some activities that the faculty can use, we would be more than happy to come and collaborate. I think we're doing this one for the dental in next month. I'm very excited about that. So anything, any way that works for your faculty, for your department, please do let us know. Thank you so much. Have a lovely night. Yeah, it's already 7:30. So yeah, whatever night is left, but sending good wishes and prayers.